So now we're ready to go, and our speaker today is Buzz from Texas, and Buzz Smith, and he's been involved in evangelizing electric vehicles. And I think we'll just have kind of just a discussion thing going here. He really doesn't have a presentation as such, but he can kind of introduce himself and kind of get things started, and we can just ask questions as we go along and that sort of thing. So Buzz, take it away.
All right. I'm Buzz Smith. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. Don't hold that against me. I did not put those guys in office. But basically in 2012, I got my first plug-in vehicle. It was a Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid. Brought it home. My wife sees it and says, I have no interest in driving that. That's your car. And my response was, cool. And within 60 days, she traded in her car and got a Volt and as well. And in fact, we say that we revolted, and it's been plug-in from then on. We have done plug-in hybrids. Our next vehicle will be a completely battery electric vehicle. But about a year into having my my Volt, I called the sales guy up that I bought it from. And this is at the biggest classic or biggest Chevy dealership in the world. And I asked him, what are you guys going to be doing for National Plug-in Day? And this is before it became National Drive Electric Week. And he goes, well, what's that? And I just couldn't believe it. I said, Kevin, you got to know about this stuff. You're going to have people coming to the lot that day, and they're going to be asking about your plug-in vehicles. So I pitched the idea through him to the dealership management that they really ought to invite all of us that had bought plug-in vehicles from that dealership back, throw a hamburger at us and we'll talk about our EV all day long. That's just the way all of us are. And the dealership management hated that idea. They do not want anyone between the salesperson and the customer. But they knew they had a problem. They knew that they had, or at least had heard anecdotally, that people were coming on the lot saying, hey, I'd like to take a look at the Chevy Volt. And salespeople would say, oh, you don't want the Volt. It's basically the same car as the Chevy Cruze, which is about half the price. It's just, and try to talk them out of it, which was just, stunning to me that this would happen when somebody's asking about a particular model. So they asked me to come into the Saturday morning sales meeting and talk to the sales staff about why I felt the Chevy Volt was so important to General Motors and to the United States. So I went in and I'm giving my pitch in the sales meeting, and I didn't know it at the time, but the general sales manager leans over to the showroom manager and says, that guy ought to be working here. And but they didn't say anything to me. So at the end of the thing, the general sales manager comes over to me and he goes, well, it looks like you can walk and talk at the same time. So if you want to hang out with our guys today, you're welcome to do so. He goes, if you help us sell a car, we'll throw some money at you. So, I'm in hog heaven then. I stuck around, and sure enough, a salesperson, one of their most senior salesperson, came up to me with a customer in tow and says, this is the man you need to ask the questions to, and hands them off to me. So I did the test drive. I talked to him about my 1 year of experience, with my car, and they bought a car. They bought a Chevy Volt. And so I went home, and I was lit up. I'm telling my wife, oh my God, I want to go do this for a living. I had so much fun today. And I'd never done commission sales in my life. In fact, my most recent employment, other than some consulting I'd done, I was a manager at an Apple store. And I had always wanted to work for Apple. I'm an early adopter of technology, and had an Apple II Plus back around 1980. And so my wife, I have a wonderful wife. In fact, she's the one that said, hey, why don't we take a look at these plug-in vehicles? She actually got me to go to the dealership and try out a plug-in vehicle to begin with. It wasn't my idea. But my wife said, you've made a lot of money in your engineering career, go for it. If you think it'll be fun for you, go have fun. And so the following Monday, I called up that showroom manager, Hank, and said, Hank, y'all said y'all were going to throw some money at me if I help you sell a car. Are y'all going to mail me a check, or do I come in to get it? How does that work? And he goes, well, we're cutting the check today. He goes, why don't you come in tomorrow and I'll have it waiting for you. Okay. And then sheepishly, I said to him, if you guys ever need somebody that understands electric vehicles, and he just cut me off. He goes, come see me tomorrow. So I go in there. They've got job application for me to fill out. They sent me off for the drug test. 3 days later, I'm working there. And Hank asked me, he said, we've never had somebody that specialized in electric vehicles. Now, to make a living, you're going to have to sell everything we have. And I knew that. And he said, but since you're specializing in electric vehicles, what kind of a title do you want to have? And one of the software companies I'd worked for, the vice president of sales actually went by the title of technical evangelist. And I always loved that title. I wanted to find a job where I could have that title. And I'm sitting there trying to think of it. And all of a sudden it hit me, evangelist starts with EV. So it's EV-Angelist. And I said, what about EV-Angelist? And he goes, that's brilliant. We'll use it. And sure enough, my business cards come in and it has the title EV-Angelist on it. And during the next 6.5 years, I was the #1 plug-in salesperson for the entire state of Texas. And 35% of all the vehicles I sold during that time were plug-in vehicles. Now, there were plug-in hybrids and eventually the Chevy Volt EV, which was 100% electric. But it was amazing to me to see customers come in and say they'd want to test drive an electric vehicle, buy an electric vehicle. And the salespeople go, oh, well, you want to go talk to that guy down there. He can answer your questions. And they wouldn't even attempt the sale. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. They're throwing commissions away. And over the next 6 years, I grew to understand why. And the why is it just takes way too long to sell an electric vehicle. Now, auto salespeople, by and large, are 100% commission based. They don't sell a car, they don't make a dollar. And so what's important for them is to sell a vehicle that's got a big profit margin because their commission is a percentage of that profit margin and something they can sell very easily and quickly. So if you came in and you wanted to look at a crew cab pickup or a pickup, which by the way, at this dealership, it was about 60% of our sales was pickup trucks. You just say crew cab, double cab, single cab, long bed, short bed, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, V4, V8, V6, what color? And then it's go to finance and buy the truck. And so they could turn around a truck sale in about an hour and a half, and they might make a commission $500-600 during that time. Now, they're not, back to back selling cars, so they're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was a relatively easy life. And between car sales, you'd see them sitting at their desk playing internet poker or something. Now, selling an electric vehicle, unlike this truck sales, you might have a customer come to the dealership 4 different times before they finally pull the trigger because they have all these questions. How much is it going to cost to fill this car up? How much does it cost to replace the battery? How far can you go on a charge? And the salespeople, one, don't want to look uninformed, but they also don't want to spend hours and hours studying this new type of vehicle when it's 1% of their sales, so they'd much rather just ignore electric vehicles or try to talk people out of it. And what I found was that it was a lot like working for Apple. Now, at the Apple store, my position was called business manager. So I led the team in the store that sold to businesses, and business owners would come in and, they're struggling with their Windows PC. They're getting viruses all the time. They're, paying outside people for IT support. They don't really, without buying new applications and learning how to use them, they don't have the ability to make videos for their business, to maybe play in the showroom or whatever business type they've got. They don't have the ability to do audio editing or anything like that without buying extra stuff. And so really to them, it was either just a cash register or just something, to send emails with. And then they would come into an Apple store because all their friends are telling them, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You got to go get a Mac. You're going to love it. And it's exactly the same as the EV world. It's all of us, all of us EV owners are telling all our friends, this is the coolest thing ever. You got to go try this. And our friends will eventually, go into a Tesla store or go into a dealership that's selling electric vehicles as part of their offering. And they'll start asking questions, just like these business customers would ask me. And they would look at the price tag of a Mac, which looks a lot more expensive than a Windows PC. But once they got talking to me and found out they didn't have to buy antivirus software, they didn't have to struggle with viruses getting past that software and infecting their machines, where they might have their business go down for a day because their PCs aren't working. And they realized that the Mac really was about the same price as a PC once you took into account all of these advantages and the software that came built in on the machine. So to me, it's like, well, migrating somebody from Windows to Mac OS is exactly the same methodology that I'll use migrating from gasoline to electric. And that's what I employed. And it just worked. I mean, people were buying them from me. They appreciated my knowledge. They still would take maybe 2 or 3 visits before they'd pull the trigger, but they would then send all their friends that were curious about their new EV to me. And so I got a lot of referral business that day, which shortened my time trying to find people to talk to about these EVs. They were coming to me and asking for me specifically. So I showed that, yeah, you can make a decent living. I was not the highest paid person at the dealership because I did take a great deal of time to educate the consumer about this new vehicle. Now, these days, I teach dealership staff how to sell electric vehicles. And it's not just teaching the salespeople. It also is a cultural change for the dealership. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the salespeople, there's a lot for them to learn, but also they can offload some of that learning by directing potential customers to websites. There's a lot of informational websites out there, but management needs to do things differently than they do with gasoline powered cars. The service department, especially service management, is terrified of the loss of revenue because they've already heard that there's very little maintenance that's required for an EV. And I would tell customers, let's go over, and we'd open up the glove box and pull out the owner's manual and flip back to the back where the scheduled maintenance chart is. And they would see that there's no scheduled maintenance for the first 150,000 miles other than rotating the wheels so that the tires will wear evenly, and maybe changing the cabin air filter if there's a lot of pollen in the air or something. But other than that, they're just maintenance-free vehicles. And so this terrifies the service department. Well, in my time at this job, I did find out that our vice president had spoken to an owner of a dealership out in California where EVs, obviously got adopted a lot faster. And what they found out in their service department is, yes, there was a lot less service. But you know what? EV drivers don't let anybody touch their EV other than that dealership. Even when it comes to replacing tires, replacing windshield wipers, if they don't do that themselves, they will take it to the dealership because, they want to make sure they're getting the exact right tire for an EV so they're not impacting their range negatively. They want to know that they aren't going to screw up this electric car. So they just take it back to the dealership where they got it because they know those people know how to do whatever has to be done. And that even carried over to me. When my daughter was in a car accident on her way back to college. She's 2.5 hours away from home. And I had that car towed all the way back to my dealership in Dallas, Fort Worth to get the body work done. And it's body work. You're thinking, well, who cares? Why would you have to, tow it 2.5 hours? I wasn't going to let anybody touch that electric car unless I knew that they understood electric cars. And I knew that our body shop had gone through training on how to discharge the battery pack, make sure that they're completely safe with that battery, when they start taking the body apart. Because in a really bad accident, there are tools that are like a whaling ship's harpoon that you would stab through the hood, to pull metal out so you can get it out, pull fenders away from tires. And you better know where that battery pack is if you start stabbing a car with a harpoon. So I wanted to deal with people that understood it. And I'm just a typical EV owner like anybody else. We're all that way. So it's been a heck of a journey. Now, after about 6.5 years, there was a mild recession going on in the auto industry. I say mild, but one of my paychecks for a 2-week pay period, I cleared $145. And you might go through 2 days and not a single human being steps on the lot. And this is, again, the largest Chevy dealership in the world. So if nobody's coming on the lot, I can't sell a car, so I can't make a buck. And I decided I was turning 62 in January of 2020. And at the end of 2019, I went to the vice president of the dealership and basically told him I'm going to retire, on New Year's. So I can give you 2 weeks notice, all that stuff, but I'm going to go off and do EV-Angelizing full time. Another thing that happened, we had a real visionary owner for this dealership. And after I'd been there a couple of years, I felt comfortable enough. He did have an open door policy where I used Photoshop to mock up a showroom that was specifically for just electric vehicle sales. At our dealership in the new car sales area, we had 4 buildings, and one of them was called the retirement home. And it was, 70-year-old car sales guys that had customers going back decades, and they worked whatever days they felt like working, but they had a steady customer base that would come back and buy from them every time. And a lot of those guys had gotten to the point where even that was just too much work. Their health is starting to fail. They were seriously retiring. And so I went and pitched the idea of turning that building into an electric sales building that we would call Electric Avenue. And so I made a street sign that, in Photoshop that said Electric Avenue. And I mocked up the inside of the store to look like an Apple store. And the reason being, I was the only guy that really understood cars at that dealership out of 50 salespeople. And if I'm not there, there still has to be some way that people that happen to come in, say on my day off, needed to be able to learn something about electric vehicles and to understand that we were a skilled electric vehicle dealership, evidence notwithstanding. And so this room looked like an Apple store. It had those wooden tables, every few feet. It had video displays on the wall, 5 of them in all, that would show slideshows about electric vehicles and bust myths and stuff, customers' photos with their EVs saying how great it was. And at the end of the building, we had a room where you could actually close the door. It was an all glass room that we called the EV Education Lounge, and there were big couches there and all, and you can go in and not have all the distracting noise of the dealership, but you could sit there and learn about EVs watching these videos on the display. And like I said, I was the #1 salesperson for the state of Texas. Our dealership obviously was the #1 dealership for the state of Texas in electric vehicle sales. And we kind of figured it out on our own how to do this thing right. And to this day, I have customers calling me just to see how things are going, to maybe ask a question about their EV, and they know they can depend on me. And one day I was, he did build this building for me. They actually cut a trench through the parking lot out where the inventory was, so that we could put in 4 level 2 chargers out there right where the cars were parked, so that people pulling into the dealership would see cars plugged in, not hidden in the back somewhere with a bunch of pickups between you and them, but it was right in their face. Hey, this is an electric vehicle. Why don't you ask us about it? And we had big signs that said Electric Avenue. And one day these 2 gentlemen came in, older gentlemen, and I was alone in the EV showroom at that point, and they were looking around and they really looked like they were in awe. And so I went up and introduced myself, and they said they were from the Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance, TEXETRA. And they had been touring the state of Texas and touring dealerships to understand why EVs weren't selling better. In most places they went, the people at dealerships were either openly antagonistic or would just ignore them because, oh, you're one of those EV people, and just would ignore them. And they came in and it was obvious that we were focused on EVs, at least in this one building. And they got talking to me and they asked me to become a board member. Today, I'm still a board member with TEXETRA. We're a nonprofit that works with the state government on infrastructure rollout policy, taxation on EVs, things of that sort. And so that's what I've been up to for the last 2 years full time, but about 6 years in all, I've been out there really evangelizing, public speaking, teaching dealerships how to sell them, teaching dealership management what they need to change to get their salespeople to sell electric vehicles. There are things they can do that will teach those salespeople about electric vehicles. That's a much better thing to do than just say, here's the manual, go read it. Because unless you live the lifestyle, you're not really going to have all those answers right off the cuff. And that's what the customer needs to see. Not only that you have the answer, but that you're confident in the answer and that you're excited about them taking this step into a new world. And when you do that, they buy electric vehicles. Anybody have any questions so far?
You know, Buzz, I just wanted to chime in because that last thing triggered a memory when I bought my Leaf, and the dealer, the sales guy, he didn't tell me much about it, but he said take it 24 hours and see what you think.
Yeah.
Well, I took it 24 hours and I went on an errand with it. Well, my car I had before that was quite a bit older, didn't have a start button. He didn't tell me you have to hold down the brake pedal and then press the start button. So I got where I was going to go and then did my errand, came back to the car. It wouldn't start. Couldn't figure it out. My wife had to come pick me up. I called that sales rep. He couldn't figure it out. And it was a 2-second answer. Anyway, I ended up buying the car, but that I thought, oh man, this is a lemon.
Back in the software industry, that actually happened to me at a Hertz rent-a-car place, and it was a gasoline-powered car, but it was this push-button start, and if you didn't have your foot on the brake, that car wouldn't start. And on this hot day, and I'm wearing a suit, and I've got my suit bag and my laptop, I had to go all the way back to the desk and say, hey, this car won't start. Oh, we got to hold the brake down. So I've been there, done that. I know what that feels like. Now, actually, the very first vehicle, when my wife first said, let's go look at electric vehicles, we knew about the Chevy Volt. We knew about the Leaf. We wanted to go 100% electric. So the first EV I ever drove was the Leaf, first generation Leaf. And excellent saleswoman selling the car because as soon as we got to a straightaway, she told me, punch it to the floor. And then when we had a curve coming up, she goes, really accelerate into this curve. You aren't going to believe the handling. And I was blown away. And, I mentioned earlier that I'm an early adopter of technology. So yeah, I wanted this car right then. And my wife, it was a Saturday, my wife's like, well, let's go home and talk about it. And we'll come back on Monday. And she's just started tearing up the internet, all day Sunday. And it was right about the time, again, this is 2012. So it was right about the time that the news was coming out that the Nissan Leaf struggled in high heat states, Arizona and Texas being great examples of high heat states, because the battery was not liquid thermally managed. It was just air cooled. And so based on that, and that they would permanently lose some range, we scratched the Leaf off. And so I'm looking for the next thing I could possibly buy. And the choices were Tesla Model S and Roadster, no, outside my price range. And looking around some more, the Chevy Volt. And the thing that fascinated me about the Chevy Volt was just the pure brilliance of the design. The Prius, when it first came out, was a revolutionary new idea. And if you look at the adoption rate, and I've got charts of this on my blog, at about the 40th month they were available, suddenly adoption just shot through the roof. And it was because gas prices went way up and everybody started buying Priuses. And nowadays you drive around and about every third car you look at, it's a Prius out there. But the interesting thing was they designed it the way I would have as an ex-engineer. I would have said, okay, electricity is more efficient when you are below 35 miles an hour. So those speeds will exclusively be electric, and speeds above that will be exclusively gasoline powered. And that just seems like the ultimate solution. And it turns out that General Motors had a better idea, which is now propagating through the entire plug-in hybrid industry. And that's that, no, if we have a battery pack that has enough to do all your driving on your average day, then you're going to be basically driving an electric vehicle, and only depending on that gas engine when you do extraordinary driving, driving to Estes Park from Texas, for instance. Yeah, you're going to run on gas. You're not going to worry that there's because this is, again, 2012, not many chargers out there. You're not going to worry about infrastructure or anything like that because there's plenty of gas stations. And so what General Motors did is they went out and did a study and found that the vast majority of Americans drive less than 40 miles a day. In fact, I think it's less than 30 miles a day. And so the very first Chevy Volt that came out had a 38-mile range. And then it was, after it had depleted that, it would switch. And the Chevy Volt would stay electric no matter how fast you were going. I've had mine up to 101 miles an hour on electricity. And, that's thrilling to me. I'm a big old nerd. But that idea that you would be 100% electric, maybe 51 weeks out of a year, made that car's miles per gallon equivalent around 99 miles per gallon in my actual use. And being an engineer, I'm a math guy. One of the earliest articles I wrote was, where I said, this is my monthly payment. This is what I'm saving on oil changes and on fuel. So effectively, I have the same monthly payment as my 1976 Chevy Monte Carlo, the very first brand new car I ever bought in my life. And to this day, I remember the monthly payment. It was $170.61 a month. And it was, grueling to pay that back in 76. But the fact that in 2012, my car was effectively $170 a month was a huge advantage. And it's one of the reasons that my wife, less than 2 months later, got one right behind me. And when my daughter was getting ready to graduate from high school and had gotten a partial scholarship to college, we bought her one, so our whole family, we had 2 level 2 chargers, and my daughter got stuck using her level 1 charger, but we became an all volt family. And the cars changed us. And this is another thing that I don't think the auto industry understands, or for that matter, the solar power industry. Their number one targets for selling solar panels should be to people that have electric vehicles, because our eyes have been opened. We understand that the world is different, and we're more open to adopting new technologies like that. And we had spent our entire adult life, maybe every 10 years upping to the next bigger home, next fancier neighborhood, and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the kids start growing up and moving away. And you get to where you're in this big house and there's rooms that you're not even walking in anymore, but you feel like you've made it. You're at this place in your life, and it's hard to let go of that. But the car made it where we both looked at each other and thought, what are we doing? Our electric bill in the summertime was sometimes $600 for a month's worth of electricity. And we just thought, this is the dumbest thing. We spent all our life, like everybody else, moving up to bigger and bigger houses. And so we downsized. And when we did downsize, we built a new house so it would be much more efficient. And we asked the house salesperson, what are the rules in the neighborhood for solar panels? Because we were positive that we were going to, within the first month, we were going to get solar panels. And they laid it all out for us. They showed us the deed restrictions, and it was exactly the same as the state law of Texas. And we thought, well, we're going to, adhere to all that. So great, we're going to have solar panels on our new house. And like I said, within the first month of us having this new house, we had Tesla come out, or back then it was Solar City, and they did their site survey. They drew up the plans, and we had to submit them, of course, to the HOA for approval, and they denied us. And so I called the HOA president. I said, what's going on? We did everything that the rules say we have to do, the HOA rules, and yet we got turned down for solar panels. And that's why we downsized. That's why we moved to this neighborhood. So he goes, well, go ahead and resubmit it to the architectural committee. He goes, I'll go find out what's going on. Well, about 3 days later, he called me up. He goes, hey, I found out why you were turned down. I said, oh, okay, what was it? He goes, they think they're ugly. And I became the crotchety old guy that would sit in the front yard. And when people would come in and take a look at the new homes and they'd see me outside, they say, hey, how do you like living in this neighborhood? I say, oh, it sucks. And they go, what? I said, yeah, the HOA did this, and I became the angry solar panel guy. And, get off my lawn, you whippersnappers. And so I got this reputation where they actually would say, oh, that's the solar panel guy. And the state of Texas, believe it or not, changed the law where if your neighborhood has more than 50 homes in it and you're adhering to the rules that the state of Texas had published as law, then they couldn't stop you from getting solar panels. And they didn't call me to tell me this. The HOA didn't. They sent a letter out to everybody saying that we're no longer going to prohibit solar panels. And so again, we immediately called around to solar panel companies. Solar City was much more expensive at that point than they had been originally. So we went with a smaller company, but still a good product. They're up on our roof generating electricity to this day. And I wish I could have a wind turbine of some sort on the property as well, but I can see that they're not going to let me have that.
Buzz, I'm just curious, what are your plans for the end of your battery life in your personal EVs? And what did you tell your customers? Trade in or get a new battery pack?
Well, at the time, and my car was registered as part of this, there was a website that Volt owners had where we're all kind of competing for most miles on our battery pack. And it turns out the person that won was a little over 475,000 miles before that Volt battery pack finally went. And so when customers would ask me, what do I do? Or well, actually the question always came up about dollars. What does it cost to replace the battery pack? And my answer to them was always, who cares? And they would look at me like I was insane. I said, look, it's warranted for 8 years, 100,000 miles. Do you normally keep cars more than 100,000 miles? And I go, and most of them would say no, but some would say yes. And then I would take them to the website and say, look at the mileage on these cars. These cars are on the road today. And that one's got 250,000 miles. That one's got 300,000 miles. And I'd just show them the list and diffuse that. But one of the fascinating things that I found in the Chevy Volt owners group on Facebook was a guy had taken 3 Chevy Volt battery packs and made his own solar panel backup system, energy storage. And he bought a big plate of aircraft aluminum. I think it was a 1-inch thick plate, and bolted these battery packs. And so it was up against the wall of his garage. And that's how he was storing energy. And so one of the things I did was I started calling around to find out what would it cost for us to get energy storage. And you guys probably already know this, but you've got to have an automatic grid disconnect, because and I thought I'll be, sitting pretty if we have the grid go down, I'll still have my solar panels. And then found out once they were installed that no, they shut off, because you don't want to electrocute people working on the power lines. So you've got to have that automatic disconnect in order to have power storage. And so I called around getting quotes on that. And if you do it when the house is being built, it's pennies on the dollar. But if you do it after the house is built, it's much more expensive. And it drives that first battery pack price up by about $10,000 in Texas. So this day, I still don't have energy storage, but because Texas has I'm trying to think of the right word for it. It's not unregulated, but I can pick my own electricity provider here in Texas. And because of that, there is a nonprofit website that you can go to. It's called powertochoose.org. And you can say, I want 100% renewable energy. I want a company that will buy back my solar surplus, and it'll filter out all the companies and show you ones that match that criteria. And so today I've got an electric provider that buys my surplus, and that's working for me for now. But I would like our next house, if we have another house. I mean, I am 64, but if we ever sell this house and move on, I will probably build a house from scratch just so that I can have the storage that I want.
So you made your own power wall, or?
No, I didn't. This was somebody else in the
Okay.
Chevy Volt owners group.
I see.
Another thing I found that helped me with my sales, especially post-sales support. One of the things the car salespeople hate is after they sold you the car, if you're constantly calling them with questions, because if they're answering your questions, other people are grabbing the customers out in the lot and making money, and you're just supporting somebody that already bought your car. So I had a habit that as they were driving off the lot, I had a boilerplate email that I would send to them that would have a link to pluginamerica.com, texetra.org, on down the list, my blog, And if they bought the Chevy Bolt EV, the Chevy Bolt EV owners group on Facebook. If it was the Volt, it was the Volt owners group on Facebook. And I would tell them, you may have issues, or you may have questions that come up after we're closed for the day. Or maybe you can't reach me because I've got my phone turned off or whatever reason. These are great resources for you. And I tell them, I bet that even at 2 a.m, you can ask the most esoteric question in the Chevy Volt owners group. And within 2 hours, you'll probably have 20 answers to your question. And so most of the customers then would rely on these fellow Volt owners, fellow Bolt owners to get those questions answered instead of calling me all the time. Now, every time they came into the dealership, if they were buying new tires or whatever, they'd always stop by my desk and want to chat with me, which was fine. But it got to where the questions that they had to ask, and a bunch of them were just, what happens if lightning hits the house? They would just ask it on Facebook and, check back 30 minutes later and have the answer that they needed. And they didn't have to call me all the time. And it's little things that I learned like that's what I'm teaching dealerships now is, here's a boilerplate email. Make sure you put this together. Make sure every person that buys a car takes that information with them. I also would look at, I became very involved in the state government through Texetra, and Texas has a $2,500 rebate for new electric vehicle purchase or lease. And so I would have that paperwork. And in Texas, it's about 40 pages of documents that you put together, and the dealership has to sign it. So at any other dealership in the state, most of the salespeople didn't even know this rebate existed. So the customers didn't even get that $2,500 because they didn't find out about it. And then if they did, and they knew, and they found out what website to go to download the paperwork, they'd find that, oh, I've got to drive all the way back out to the dealership and have them sign off on this too. And so I got in a habit of, whenever somebody bought a vehicle, an electric vehicle from me, I would have the paperwork ready while they were in finance. I would have a note in the finance folder saying, these documents, you need to make copies for the customer because they go with this document set to the state so they can get their $2,500. Now, Texas, every 2 years, our legislature meets. And so they would set the program up to run for 2 years and just terminate. And some years they ran out of money ahead of time. And so there would be people that bought cars in Texas, but it was during a lapse in the program, so they didn't get the $2,500. Well, one day I get a call from the state government, and they wanted to let me know ahead of time. And they didn't call, all the dealerships. They'd gotten to know me, but they called and let me know, hey, we are starting tomorrow. We're bringing the program back, but we're going to make it retroactive to the beginning of the legislative session, which was the previous September. And this is like in January or February. So I pulled up every single person that had bought an electric vehicle during that time that was going to be covered by the retroactive nature of the rebate, and told them, hey, there's a $2,500 check you can get if you'll do these things. And it took me all day one day. So I didn't sell cars that day. I'm just calling up customers, and there's nothing in it for me. I'm just wanting them to get that $2,500 because I know that they're going to tell all their friends, if you're getting an electric vehicle, you need to go find Buzz because he did this wonderful thing for me. And believe it or not, 2 different families asked me, can you only get one of those rebates? And I said, no, but only one per EV. And they say, no, if I come in today and buy another one from you, can I then file the paperwork and get 2 rebates? And the answer is yes. I'd say, well, yeah, you could. And they came in and bought a new car. So instead of, the 3 visits with all the questions and hours of spending time with them, it was like selling a pickup. They just came in, bought a new electric vehicle from me and left. And that's what we have to get back to. Today, car salespeople aren't really sales consultants. Their business cards say that. But we all know how gasoline-powered vehicles work. We've been buying them as a country for over 100 years now. So there, yes, you may have some new whiz-bang suspension system that you can tell me about, or tell me about your torque or something, but I know how to fill it with gas. I know what that's going to cost me. I know how the accelerator and the brake pedal works. There's nothing for me to learn about this gas vehicle from you, salesperson. And so they become sales clerks. All they do is stand out there, and when you pull up, they grab a hold of you, ask you what kind of car you want. They go show it to you. They get you into finance, and that's what they do. I mean, they're just clerks, like at a clothing store, let's say. And what we need is to go back to sales consultants. And we have a very small window here. I do believe that the tipping point is coming faster than most people, even EV owners, believe, because we've seen it happen in the recent past. Now, there's a famous picture of Fifth Avenue in New York City, and the two photographs are taken 10 years apart. Easter morning, 1903, Easter morning, 1913. The first one, there's this huge traffic jam of horses and buggies. And in 1913, it's all automobiles with one horse and buggy on the street. And in fact, the traffic jam's so big, this photograph has a red circle so you can see, the horse and buggy from all the other cars there. Well, that's 10 years, but the second biggest investment most people make is their automobiles. So this was a huge change, and it happened in only 10 years. Now jump forward to 1997, or was it 2007? 2007. Steve Jobs comes out on stage and he shows the iPhone. At that time, cell phones were free. You signed a contract with your cell provider, AT&T or whoever, and you got a free phone. And so people had Nokias, they had Ericssons, they had Motorola's. BlackBerry was the dominant business phone. If you were a business person and you pulled anything out other than a BlackBerry, you were a loser. And so all of these incumbent companies were making fun of the iPhone, because you were going to have to pay $599 out of your pocket to get an iPhone and still then sign a contract with AT&T, who was the only provider at the time. Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, actually on the Microsoft campus had a mock funeral for the iPhone. They had this giant iPhone that they were carrying to the grave because it was the dumbest thing ever that Apple thought people would pay $599 for these phones. And within 3 years, every phone out there looked like an iPhone. Now that went from 10 years in this automotive world to change from horse and buggy to cars, to 3 years to go to all those different form factors, to the smartphones we have today, the tablet-like smartphones. And the world is accelerating. It's happening faster and faster. And so the EVs are going to take over. Everybody's talking about 2030, 2035. I believe we're looking at a 5-year window. And dealerships are either going to get on board and become that trusted resource that those buyers need, because again, it's the second largest purchase that most people ever make is their automobile. They need to feel comfortable that they're making the right decision. And to do that, they need somebody to hold their hand and guide them into this world. And we are poorly equipped at dealerships to do this today. But mark my words, if we don't do this, dealerships are gone. They will not exist anymore. It will become like a Tesla store. So there will be no inventory that you take home that day. You'll be able to sit in it. You'll be able to test drive it, experience what the car's like, and then order it. And there are still laws on the books to prevent OEMs from selling directly to the public. But as states experience what Texas has experienced, we have the Gigafactory down in Austin now, the Cybertruck from Tesla, and a lot of the Model Ys will be built right here in Big Oil, Texas. Well, those are lots of jobs right in the state capital, very visible for the political structure of our state to realize, holy cow, we just got a bunch of our voters new jobs in a new industry that's taking off. And then Rivian looked at Texas for their factory. In fact, right here in Fort Worth. Now we lost. Georgia won that competition, but they're going to put it in some small rural town in Georgia. And the citizens of those towns haven't woken up yet to what's changing in the world. And they're protesting. They don't want that factory to come there. I'm hoping Rivian gives us another look. I would love to see the second Rivian factory be right here in Texas. But you're starting to see states competing for that business. They want the battery factories. They want the automotive factories. Well, if I'm somebody like Tesla and you've got a law in the books that says all cars have to be sold through a dealership, I'm going to use my political clout to get that law gone. Now, it's still in effect in Texas, but you wait and see. That's probably going to change because money talks and BS walks in Texas.
So do you see the main detractor for people wanting to buy an EV as the lack of an infrastructure and lack of gosh, I don't see any chargers in my apartment building, or I don't see any ones down at the 7-Eleven, or what's your view of that?
That was a great conversation to have, because I'd tell them, and even to this day, 10 years of driving electrically, and I've plugged in at public chargers maybe 10 times. Now, I live in a house, so I've got a garage and I can plug in, but people would ask me, well, where do I take it to charge it? And I go, well, where do you take your iPhone to charge it? And they look at me real weird and they say, well, I just plug it in the wall. And I'll tell them exactly, you know what, you're going to do the exact same thing. And they'd say, just a regular 110 outlet. And I'd say, well, how many miles a day do you drive? Knowing that the vast majority of Americans are less than 40 miles a day. And I would tell them, you know what, with that 110 outlet, you can recoup that 40 miles of range while you sleep at night. So you're still, even though you may only have access to a 110 12 amp outlet, you're still going to recoup all that mileage. Now, if you're going cross country, yeah, you need to think about, where am I going to charge? And this is how that works. And I'd walk them down that road. The other thing that was really cool was there was a little breakfast restaurant across the street from us, and the owner must have been a forward-thinking person, but they had 2 blank chargers in the parking lot. And so the customer would say, well, where do I go to charge a car? And I would give them that usual spiel. And they would ask about trips. And I'd say, there are chargers out there and there are apps for it. And I'd show them, the map on PlugShare, and Dallas, Fort Worth just has chargers everywhere. And then I'd say, look right over there across the street. And I would point. And I say, you see those 2 big boxes? And they'd say, yeah. I said, those are car chargers. Go over there, take a look, and they'd drive across the street and look at it and go, wow, he's right, And I would just tell them, you don't see them because you're not looking for them. And you haven't got the app to tell you where they are, but they're out there. I said, do we need more? Yes, we absolutely need more in the long run. But one of the eye-opening things that I said to people, and you see them kind of shocked when you say it, is I would say, you know what, just because you own an EV, it doesn't mean that you turned in your gas car driver's license. You can still drive a gas car if you have to. So when you go to grandma's house at Christmas, or you're going up to Colorado for a 2-week vacation, take just a part of the savings that you got from driving on electricity all year, from not doing oil changes, from not getting brake jobs, from not having to replace a timing belt or an engine gasket. Just take a portion of that money and go rent the biggest, baddest Chevy Suburban premier version out there and take it on a trip, and don't even worry about it. Don't worry about where the chargers are. No one's going to tell on you for driving a gas car for that 1 week. And you'll still financially come out way ahead. And you'd see them go, wow, you're right. This doesn't mean I can't ever drive drive with gasoline. It just means that most of the time I won't. Now, to show people how the world really works, we did do a video. The ABC affiliate here in Dallas, the local news, did they have a series where they take a question from a customer and they show what the answer is by actually performing whatever the thing is. And somebody asked, is an EV any good for long distance driving in Texas? Because we are a really big state. I mean, it takes a while to get around here. And they went and drove a Chevy Volt EV from Dallas to Austin, which is about 3.5 hours, from Austin to Houston, another 3-hour drive, and then from Houston back to Dallas, which is about 4.5 hours. And the guys that did this had never driven an electric vehicle before. So yeah, they struggled. They pulled up to chargers that if they just used PlugShare would have told them this thing's down all the time, don't go there, or this one's been shut off permanently. And they pulled up to chargers and they're basically very close to the end of their charge and the charger's not working. It's been shut off. So then they've got to find another charger, but they waited so long to stop to charge that they're frantic, trying to find a place to plug in. And at the end of this video, I think the guys stopped to charge 7 different times to go about 635 miles. And this is a car that had 238 miles of range. But at the end of this video, one of the guys in the passenger seat turns to the driver and says, "Let's never do that again." And they both, high five. And this just made me so mad. And so a buddy of mine and I, we put GoPro cameras up in the car. We had, mics on, and we recorded the same drive. We stopped to charge 2 times, and we only stopped to charge when we were going to have a meal. And in the time that we ate with DC fast charging, we recovered over 200 miles of range, and we would just get in the car and go again. So effectively, it did not change the time it took to make the run. Now, coming back, a cold front started coming through Texas. I forgot to take into account that coming from Houston, which is 50 feet above sea level, to Dallas, and I can't remember how high Dallas is, but there's a lot of hills in between. So with this cold north wind going against the driving direction we're going and going uphill, we started dropping range very quickly. And I'd passed several DC fast chargers wanting to make as few stops as possible. And we got to the point where we had a deficit. We weren't going to make it to my house first. And then it looked like we wouldn't even make it to the next charger. And I had, I've got a big mouth on me, as you can tell. And so I'm telling everybody in advance, yeah, we're going to prove WFAA was full of crap, and we're going to do this thing. And Charles and I are freaking the hell out because, it's just looking terrible. And I remembered all of the advice I gave my customers. So I started drafting behind semis to get rid of that wind resistance. I slowed down. I slowed down 5 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at Apple Maps telling me how many miles to that next charger. And I'm looking at remaining charge, and it's going the other way. And I finally had a surplus, and I knew we were going to make it. So we did stop a third time to charge, but we only charged for about 20 minutes just to give us enough of a comfort zone to make it home. But it was just that common sense stuff. And I got to where I would tell my customers as they were driving off, the very last thing I would tell them was, just remember, it's a car. You drive cars, right? You've done this before. It's just a car. Don't get overworked about it. It's all going to be okay. But whenever you're starting to freak out, just stop and think, hey, it's just a car. And, it works.
Buzz, I wanted to ask you what your feelings were when you heard that General Motors was going to discontinue the Chevy Volt hybrid.
Yeah, that was one of the worst days of my life. The announcement was actually on my birthday. So I think my blog post that day is worst birthday present ever. And I do think they pulled the plug on it, pun intended, a little too early. It would have been better to have more infrastructure out there. The last model of the Volt was 2019. Here we are, it's 2022, just 3 years later. And I don't think there's a place for the Volt anymore. I don't think plug-in hybrids need to exist anymore. It's a much more complex device. It has much more maintenance than a pure EV would have. And we've got enough infrastructure for most areas of the country that we can easily do this with a 100% battery electric vehicle. The other thing that's made this possible is the average range out there now for a battery pack is 250 miles. And if you're driving less than 40 miles a day, you can start to think about recharging an electric vehicle, just like refueling a gas car. You do it with a gas car every 5 to 7 days. Okay, well, once every 5 to 7 days, go to a DC fast charger that's at a restaurant, at a movie theater, someplace where you're going to spend a little time, a shopping mall, and plug in there. And it's basically like a gas station, but you've got to find something else to do while the charge is going, because, and I'd be upfront with them, it does take longer than filling up with gasoline. But, that Kia EV6 we were talking about earlier with that 800 volt system, and a friend of mine just took delivery on a Rivian. Those two cars in 18 minutes can put 200 miles of range in the car on a DC fast charger. So we're rapidly getting to even to where we're more or less like gasoline, where it's a quick fill up. But I think, let's not oversell it. Let's let people know, yeah, it's going to take a little longer, but it's going to be okay. And in fact, when Texas had that ice storm last year, and several hundred people here died, and there were places that went without electricity 3-4 days, and it was bitterly cold. Well, my daughter and my 5 grandchildren, they lost power and water at their apartment, and they're across town from me. And so I said, look, I don't want you trying to drive in the ice. She had 5 kids, so they had a 3-row crossover. And so I said, I don't want you trying to drive a rear wheel drive vehicle on ice. You don't have the experience doing it. So I'm going to come get you guys. And my Volt, because I almost never put gas in it, had almost empty tank. I was concerned that with the heat running and as far away as they live from me, that I wouldn't make it there and back on a charge. So what I did was went to the gas station, which didn't have the ability to pump gas because they didn't have electricity. And then I went to another gas station. They were sold out of gas because they had electricity, and they were one of the few stations that did. And it was finally at the 3rd station where I could fill up. And fortunately that day I had my tripod and my video camera with me. And so I actually shot me standing with this, big heavy coat on. I've got a Russian fur hat, and you can see my breath when I exhale. The building behind me, you can see icicles, a foot long hanging off this building. Completely weird for the state of Texas. And one of the things I just kind of off the cuff said was, it seems like every time I go to these gas stations, when I finish my purchase, it says it can't print my receipt. And so I have to go inside, stand in line behind everybody that's buying a Slurpee before I can get my receipt. So that day, it actually happened with the video camera running. It comes up and says it can't print my receipt. And so I went to walk into up to the cashier, and I pulled on the door, and it was locked. And I backed up and looked, and it said, no network connection, store closed. So they couldn't run credit card transactions inside of there. Apparently the gas company still could, but the convenience store couldn't. And then my wife's a professional video editor, so I have a great tutor that can help me learn the basics of video editing. So I did this split screen thing to show people the difference between filling up with gas and filling up with electricity. And so you see me standing out in the cold, and you see my breath, and you see how long it takes just to fill that car with gas. And then you see me pull into my garage, plug the car in, and I walk in the house and close the door, and that's it. And so it's like, look how easy this is compared to filling up with gasoline. And so a big part of what I do now, as far as my public stuff, is just talking about the myths that are out there. We don't have enough charging infrastructure. Yeah, we do. Even if it means you're going to take, a 2,000-mile trip, go rent a gas car. It's not a sin. It'll be okay, And once people get their eyes open to that, and then I tell them, look, this is how much money you're going to save the 51 weeks out of the year that you're not driving cross country. That's what they need to hear. But when you go to a car dealership, because these guys and women haven't been driving electrically, they don't know that right off the cuff. And that's one of the cultural things that has to change at a dealership. Dealerships give the managers demo vehicles to drive, and every 6 months they get a new car and they turn in the old one. But salespeople don't ever get a demo vehicle to drive. And I think that should change. If you've got somebody that's going to be your EV champion, for 2 months, give them a plug-in vehicle to drive and let them charge at work, so they don't have to worry about finding a charger or anything. It's just like if they can charge at home. And I guarantee you that after 2 months of driving electrically, those people will be as fanatical as I am. They'll be out there telling all their friends, oh my God, I beat a Corvette today. Or, oh my God, the cornering was so great. Or, oh, you paid how much for a tank of gas? I'm paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And, teach them just off the cuff math in their head. Like right now, gas is $4 a gallon. So you can say, okay, if you have a car that gets 20 miles per gallon, that means it costs you 20 cents to go a mile. An electric car, if I'm paying 10 cents per kilowatt hour and I get 4 miles per kilowatt hour, it costs me 2.5 cents to go a mile. You're paying 10 times what I'm paying because gas is high right now. And if you just look at the window sticker of a car, that MPGE is a joke. The federal government looks at the British thermal units of energy and a gallon of gas and a kilowatt hour of electricity, and that's how they come up with that mile per gallon equivalent. But nobody cares about energy. What they care about is the dollars that are in their wallet. They want to know, how much is it going to cost me to get down the road? And so I made a little spreadsheet that fits right on the screen of my iPhone. And when I was selling people, I would go right up to the car and we'd punch in the number for how far you could get on 100 kilowatt hours, which is on every window sticker. And then we'd turn and look at the gas station down the street and put in how much a gallon of gas is. And I would just ask them, your current vehicle, what kind of MPG do you get? And they'd tell me that, and we'd plug that in. And so then it would calculate the MPG equivalent based on dollars instead of based on energy. And it would blow their mind. That Chevy Volt that the government says gets 99 mile per gallon equivalent, with gas at $4, it's actually 135 mile per gallon equivalent when you're looking at dollars instead of looking at energy. And when you open that up in front of a customer, they're like, oh my God. And the tipping point is going to happen so fast. I mentioned this earlier, because of the pickup trucks. Now, for 6 years, I had to sell pickup trucks and big SUVs too. And the biggest complaint is, can't you get me anything that gets more than 19 miles per gallon? And the answer is no. You know, that's what pickup trucks get. But even the government says that Ford F-150 Lightning is going to get the equivalent of 79 miles per gallon, which really means that it's over 100 mile per gallon equivalent when gasoline is priced at $4 a gallon. You tell that to a truck person and they will get one immediately. Now, I've been working auto shows as well. I've worked, the Houston Auto Show has had a dedicated EV display area for 3 years now, and I've been there all 3 years. Well, I was there the night that Ford unveiled the F-150, and I did it in a live web event. And we had big screen TVs in the EV display area, and we streamed that to these TVs so that guests at the show could see the big Ford announcement. And I have two personas when I'm working these shows. One of them, I'm the EV-Angelist, and so I'm like a revival tent preacher. And I patterned myself after Steve Martin. He was in a movie where he was a revival tent preacher, and he has this sequined blazer on. So I've got this red sequined blazer, you know, tuxedo shirt and tie and a top hat and all. And I'm the EV-Angelist. And that's the way I was dressed for this show. Now, the other one is called the Fun Slinger. And so I've got this Western outfit, even down to having a holster, but in the holster, instead of a firearm, there is a J1772 plug. And so when people ask me, well, how do you plug this in? I'll just whip that out, you know, and say, well, this is it right here. And so you see this, you stick this in the car like this, you know, and so it's just two ways to make it lighthearted and get that conversation started. Well, at the Houston Auto Show that year, I'm standing there in this outrageous red sequined outfit. And there's this guy standing next to me the whole time watching the show. You know, he's a stranger. We're just all watching the announcement, but he knows that I'm somehow involved in this world because of the way I'm dressed. And he turned and looked at me and he said, I have been against electric cars, but I know now that my next vehicle will be an electric pickup. And I'm getting goosebumps right now. I mean, that moment really meant something to me, because the world is going to change, and it's going to change fast. We now have opened up the EV market to where 60% of the people live, and that's the ones that are buying pickups. And so that is going to be the tipping point for everything. And all new technology adoption, they call it the S-curve of adoption. It starts really slow, and then suddenly the public realizes what's going on and sales skyrocket. And then eventually it levels off and some new technology will displace it, and it'll go through its S-curve. Well, just pull, you know, go online and just Google EV car sales by years, and you will see that curve is happening right now. That acceleration is happening, and it's going to be so sudden for most of these people that have never even driven an EV yet, that it's going to be a shock to them. And to me, it's just been an agonizing wait. You know, it's finally going to happen. But That's what we're going to see in the next couple of years. And dealerships have a very short time to prove that they have a value add, or they're going to be dinosaurs and they're going to fall by the wayside. And quite honestly, I think they are. I think that most of them aren't focusing on EVs right now. They're not focusing on getting the help they need. And I believe that 10 years from now, a thing like we currently see with big lots full of inventory, and we go in, and pick the car we want and drive it home that day, those days are going to go away, and it's going to be okay. In the case of your car getting totaled, there'll be some small amount of inventory so that they can pull something to get you into a car immediately, or maybe you have to rent a car. But I think we're actually watching the death of the dealership sales model right now. And they have a chance to save themselves if they will get ready right now. But I'm just not seeing it happen at the rate it needs to happen.
Hey, Buzz, I just want to say one thing. Whenever you're making a video of plugging in the car, make sure your other hand is all full of stuff. Because for me, I never plug in my car when my other hand isn't full of something. And it's easier than plugging in your phone because you only need one hand.
Yeah, and actually the last Houston Auto Show that I was at earlier this year, they had an inductive charger there where you just pull your car over this thing that looks like a Frisbee sitting on the ground. And I'd always been kind of, one of the things about EVs is how efficient they are. And so I've been kind of against inductive charging, thinking there must be some horrendous loss of energy. And I was at the Electrify Expo in Austin, and there was a company that provides inductive chargers there, and their inductive charges even go up to a megawatt in delivery for semis. But I asked them, what is the power loss on inductive charging? And they said, well, we're 94% efficient. We lose about 6% in the transfer. And I'm thinking, wow, really that's negligible, because people don't, unfortunately, we're a lazy population, and people don't put the charge plug back where they should. They just leave it on the ground. Then the next person drives over it and crushes it. And you have to worry, is it a Tesla plug? Is it a Chatamo plug? Is it a J1772? Those days need to go away. And we really need the fleet to move towards inductive charging, where you just pull up to a parking spot and your car just starts charging. And in Detroit, they've already announced they're going to put in an electric highway that as you're driving down the road, it's inductively charging your car. I think they're only going to do 3 miles as a test bed, but this is something that's coming, and it's going to again change the world when people realize, oh, there is no plug. Right now we're in the beta VHS days or DVD Blu-ray phase, where these competing plugs are working against each other. But Chatamo already is being discontinued in Europe, so I expect it to go away here as well. So we'll have the American standard CCS, and then the Tesla standard. There are already adapters to take care of that, and Tesla's talking about, or they still haven't done it, but they're saying even their DC fast charging network is going to be open to other brands, and there just won't be a need to worry about plugs anymore if we go in this new direction. But thanks for that tip. I'm going to do that.
I have to admit, I've had I've been driving electric since 2013. I had 2 different Leafs, and then now I have a Tesla Model 3, but I never worried about charging. All the times I ever needed a charger with my Leaf and stuff, I never had to wait for one. I always was about the only person there ever, But now, and even more after listening to you, I'm starting to think like, I'm gonna go, I need to charge it. I'm just gonna have to wait for a long time. All the chargers will be full. So it's so funny that now I'm getting that, oh my God, I won't be able to charge feeling that I never had for the last 9 years.
But, with the infrastructure bill that did pass, there is funding for 500,000 chargers. So we are going to see them cropping up every 50 miles along the major routes in the relatively near future, say the next 3 years. We're going to see that really rolling out. And I think just like the beginning of the internet, there are businesses that we can't even imagine today that are about to happen. And, go back to the internet. Amazon started out as a bookseller. You don't need to go to a store to buy a book. You know, it's not like you have to try it on, see how it looks on you or anything. It's a book, you know, so it's just a commodity. And everybody thought, well, that makes sense. Now, if you had said at the beginning of the internet that you were going to buy clothes on the internet without ever trying them on, and they would be shipped to your house, all of us would have thought, well, that's the stupidest thing ever. How do I know what it's going to fit like? What's it going to look like on me? That's never going to work. And yet today I buy clothes on Amazon. And if I don't like them, it's, you know, free return. They even pay for the shipping. So I think we're going to see in areas, and there's an area of Dallas, Fort Worth, Las Colinas, which is by and large just gigantic apartment communities. You know, it may not be possible to retrofit those apartments with chargers, but what we will see is in areas where there's all these different apartment complexes, we'll see a lot that goes up that maybe has a security fence around it. They'll have a shuttle bus so that you come there once a week, you know, to charge your electric vehicle. You drop it off. Their shuttle bus takes you back to your apartment. You tell them, you know, what time to get you in the morning. They pick you up in the morning, bring you back to your car, which is now fully charged. That's going to last you the next week, and you go on your way. So even if you've got an older EV that can't charge at today's highest, you know, 350 kilowatt speeds, it won't matter, because even at level 2, you can recharge overnight, 250 miles of range pretty easily. So these lots won't be full of DC fast chargers, which can be as much as $150,000 a piece. They're going to be level 2 chargers that are $500 a piece. So you could afford to put 150 of them in a parking lot and pay somebody to sit there and charge people's cars, and probably still charge what people charge monetarily, what people would pay at a DC fast charger on a road trip. And so that will enable people that have the earlier vehicles like the Leaf that can't charge at today's speed to buy them on the used market. And Consumer Reports says that used EVs are some of the best used cars out there you can get, and they can step into this world. And that's the thing that we need. Is I'm so tired of the $150,000, $90,000 EVs out there, because it's given EVs the reputation of being for rich white men. When the fact of the matter is, there are so many great choices that after the government incentive, and especially here in Texas with the Texas rebate, they're cheaper than an equivalent gas car. You know, the Kia EV6 is a great example. Those start around $35,000, $36,000. Well, after $10,000 in government money, we're talking a $25,000 to a $26,000 car that gets the dollar equivalent of 130 miles per gallon, requires no maintenance. Holy cow, that's a no-brainer. Why aren't you in line right now to buy one? You know, and I would buy one today. I'm looking for, we went down to being a one-car family. My last Bolt was a 3-year lease. The lease ended and I let it go back to the leasing company because I knew I wanted to go fully electric. And right now, because of the supply chain issues and all, dealers are charging over MSRP, and I'm not going to pay more than the list price for something that's going to depreciate anyway. But I'm sitting here wanting to buy a new EV so badly. And there are so many great choices that are affordable. But I'm going to wait for them to be MSRP or less before I pull the trigger. Hopefully. I may find myself too impatient.
Sounds to me like you should go get that Kia EV6 today.
Do. I mean, it'll blow your mind. The all-wheel, the one that I grew up in was the all-wheel drive GT version. And I'm telling you, when they punched that car, it threw me back in the seat. It was exhilarating being in that car.
You know, one place that you couldn't drive with I couldn't drive with my Leafs for the longest time was Estes Park. They didn't have
that uphill drive. And also your Leaf had what, 89 miles of range, I think?
Yeah, it had about 100, but you couldn't charge. I mean, I could stop in Boulder and charge up, but I could get to Estes Park, but there were no chargers in Estes Park for the longest time.
And hasn't Estes turned that around? I mean, they've got free level 2 chargers. They've got DC fast chargers now. Their visitor center has 3 or 4 DC fast chargers, if I remember. And I was plugged in. The Volt only does level 2 charging. I was plugged in at a level 2 charger at their public library, and elk started walking through. So I get my video camera out, I'm filming all this, and I was trying to actually do a story for my YouTube channel about charging. I called it Charging in the Wild. I was going to charge in Estes Park, Colorado, and all these elk start coming through. And then a little while later, I come back to the car after it's almost through charging, and there's this big bush down at the end of the parking lot that's just shaking back and forth. And I wonder what the heck is going on down there. And I walked down there, and that was a terrible mistake, because there's this giant bull elk, and the rack on this thing was unbelievable. He did not like me coming down there to see what was going on. And he charged at me at one point. And the expletive I used made it where I couldn't use the video on YouTube as I jumped behind a tree to try to save my butt.
Well, your wife can edit that out for you.
Pardon me?
I said your wife can edit that out for you, can't she?
That's true. That's true. But it was embarrassing for me to have to run from the elk. I don't want to show that at all.
Well, I'm gonna go stand in front of my view before you guys all leave first, because only two of you saw.
Yeah, she does have a hell of a view.
Oh, what? Oh, I can't see it, can you? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Kind of. It's kind of washed out, isn't it? But it's really, really colorful. It looks all white, but it's very colorful. All the houses are different colors. And
Where are you, Jill?
Guanajuato, Mexico.
Even the ceiling is really cool looking over you.
Oh, yeah.
Is that really beams and bricks?
Yeah.
Huh.
You'd think it would be cooler in here, but it's not. It's the hottest time of the year. Late April and May is their hottest. It's really high up. It's 2,000 feet higher than Denver, but it never gets hot, but it's hot for my taste.
Spoken like a true Coloradoan.
Yeah.
It's like y'all are living in bitter cold as far as I'm concerned. 80-degree days, 85, I'm in heaven. You get below about 50 and I'm not comfortable anymore.
Yeah, Buzz, it's terrible here. Tell all your friends not to come.
It's cold. I have two people in my house while I'm gone, one from Costa Rica and one from New Zealand. And one's freezing to death and the other one's dying of the heat. It's the same temperature in the house for both of them, but they're like, it's funny.
Well, is there anybody else that has any questions for Buzz?
I was wondering if, since you're in the DFW area, if you've run into Dex Tan. He's doing a lot of leaf work.
Say again?
Replacing batteries. And have you run across Dex Tan since you're in the DFW area?
No.
He's doing a bunch of battery work on the leafs. So I guess he's the guy in that region to get your leaf battery swapped.
No, I have not met him yet. In fact, the leaf guy that I know better than anybody is in Boulder. It's Nigel. I'm sure y'all know Nigel.
Yeah, well,
Nigel and I both were hired by the company that does training for General Motors to do sales training for Chevrolet. And we'd never met in person. And, seeing somebody on a screen like this, you don't really get a feel for that actual person. And so, Nigel, he's bald, similar to me. And turns out that we're both about the same height, both about the same build. And the first time we met was at this Chevy showroom where we're getting ready to be videoed for the training. And we both, had pictures of us taken together. And I sent one to my wife. He sent one to his wife. And his wife responded, separated at birth. And my wife responded, twins, ! So we really hit it off. He's got his British accent, and people tell me I have a Texas accent, but I don't think I have an accent, so but we had a good time. Nigel's a good guy.
I replaced my battery a few months ago, so I got my parts from Dex.
What did
Oh,
it cost, out of
how many
curiosity?
miles did you have on your car when you did that?
About 80,000. That's a 2012. So the battery was pretty degraded. I was down to about 20 miles of range.
Oh, but it was a 2012, so it was out of warranty.
Yeah. And,
What size battery did you put in, Scott?
I put another 24 in. but I was able to get a 2015 for a pretty decent price.
Uh-huh.
Ended up being about $4,000.
Oh, not bad.
It's cheaper than
So
getting a
to
new
triple my
car.
range, yeah.
How much
I'm
did
here,
your range
bud.
increase?
By the way.
I about tripled it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe that General Motors did right by their clients with that Bolt EV. You know, only 5 vehicles caught fire out of 75,000, but they replaced everybody's battery pack, even those that had bought new cars that had the newer battery pack in them that weren't covered originally under the recall. And people had to wait, you know, for them to crank out that many batteries, but they started everybody's warranty over at 0 miles. So I had customers that have 2017 Volts with 1-month-old battery packs. You know, they've got 1 month of their 10-year or 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty, you know. So I think that they did the right thing the way they stood behind their product. I hope all manufacturers will do that if they get into a bind, you know, where something does go wrong, because it's going to happen. And, you know, you just got to make sure that the customers realize that you are going to take care of them. And once they do that, you know, they can relax and just enjoy their new EV.
I wouldn't
my
want
car
to
was
be
definitely an early adopter of a car, but I think Nissan is doing a lot better these days with their warranties and stuff.
I wouldn't want to be that guy who was in charge of quality assurance at the battery factory that missed that flaw.
No lie,
That costs
because
a lot of money.
yeah,
It would have cost
LG
even-
paid 90% of that recall cost. I think it was about $1 billion recall, and LG paid 900 million of it. I imagine heads did roll at LG over that one.
I must say something about that. Hi, Buzz, by the way.
Hi.
I say
Is that
kudos
Nigel?
to, yeah, nice to hear from you.
Nigel, how's it
Hello.
going, bud?
Yeah, good. Just been listening in. You know, when people talk about the Chevy Bolt and the battery replacement, I say, you know, kudos to Chevy for doing what they did. For the 15 car 5s I have to have replaced everyone is a very admirable thing to do. And you know, so when people are sort of complaining about this sort of thing, it's like that was an incredible thing that they did there. And think about how many spare batteries there are right now that can be used for storage.
Yes.
You know, which is very cool. Nice to see you. You look just like me, but I just cannot grow a beard like that.
I got to get a cowboy hat on you at some point.
Yeah, I look so bad in hats, but my head is getting nuked in the sun, so I need to wear them. Hi, everyone. I see Dave there. David as well. Good to see you all. I'm going to go quiet now, but lovely to see you all. Nice discussion, by the way, Buzz.
Bye-bye, Nigel.
Well,
My brother Nigel.
I think this has been a good 90 minutes that we've had today.
Wow.
We sure appreciate Buzz coming in and sharing his enthusiasm. I think we're all pumped up now, and it's been good. We will hopefully we'll get this video on our YouTube channel, and that way people that missed out will have the opportunity to check in and enjoy what we've experienced here today.
And Jill, I'm sure that they've got my email address. Somebody can get it to me. Let me know what you think of that EV6 once you go test drive one. I think it's going to blow your mind. And,
Well, I think my next door neighbors have one, so I'll just get them.
oh, perfect. And then my website, if any of y'all want to keep up with what's going on, is the EV-Angelist.com. There are links there to the YouTube channel, my LinkedIn page and all that. I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn about electric vehicles as well. But, you know, we're all of us pioneers that are riding this wave, and all of us need to now give back. We're going to have people coming up to us saying, I've been thinking about getting an EV. You're probably doing this already, but you know, they're going to have those questions. Let's all be friendly. Let's take the time and answer them, because even the people that are from the to be unnamed political party that seems to hate EVs, even them are getting serious about EVs now, and they're getting excited about it. And we need to all just set down the divisions that we have in this country We need to stop arguing about climate change, stop arguing about EVs, and we just need to show them the way. They need somebody to hold their hand and guide them into this world, because they've been brainwashed to think that EVs are a bad thing and that there is no climate change and that the Green New Deal, is communism. We are going to come back together as a country. I think America always does. And I know a lot of us have probably had our feelings hurt at some of the things that have been said over this time, and we just need to set that aside. There are people that need our help, and our help will help save the planet. So let's put down those grudges and let's help people out.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Buzz, and look forward to, browsing your website and YouTube channel for other things that you have on there. So we'll call it quits for today, and we appreciate everybody that came out.
When this recording goes live, if somebody can drop me an email to let me know, I usually embed that video in my blog as well, so people will find out about your organization through mine. Okay,
Cool. Yeah. You are now on our newsletter list, so you'll be getting our monthly newsletter. And
great.
We'll have it announced in there when it's on our YouTube channel.
And I'm sure that I will be coming back your way, because I've got to get up to Estes. I need me some Colorado.
Yep. There you go. All righty. Well, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.